Rodrigo is a very outgoing kid. He's a happy kid. He's sweet, he's cariñoso. Yeah. I think, how do you say that?
Caring.
Caring. He is adaptable, but he is super resilient. He overcomes everything that is in front of him.
Rodrigo's very creative, very playful. He likes playing every minute of the day, and he's super loving. I mean, I think that's like the most characteristic part of his personality. Is like he's super loving.
He's some kind of an old soul.
He's my brother and I love him, and I would do a lot of things for his safety. I just think my brother is really unique, and he's like one in infinity.
I remember it was very cold those days, and we were playing outside and having fun, and then one of the nights Rodrigo came back having like a mild fever. He had suffered for several ear infections. So we thought, well, this is maybe another ear infection.
We didn't know what he had. Like, we knew that he had 7 days of fever and it wasn't coming down.
Rodrigo's pediatrician, she said, gonna have you go to the Dell Children, and we went there and they started running tests, x-rays and all that.
I'm a pediatric hematologist and oncologist at Dell Children's Medical Center. It's the best job in the world. Sometimes it's the worst job in the world, perhaps. I met Rodrigo in March of 2019. His white blood cell count was low, his red blood cells were low, and his platelets were low. And that's a very concerning problem.
Dr. Wells looked at us and he said, we confirmed that Rodrigo has leukemia, B-cell, ALL. We were sitting in the room, and Rodrigo was playing, and we were just looking at Dr. Wells, and it was tough. From the beginning, he was very straightforward, but yet very, connected with us. Rodrigo was 2.5 years old. And the news was like a shock.
Then they gave us a binder that was like this thick, like with a plan. We had 9 months of intense chemotherapy, and that we were going to have to be admitted. There was a risk of getting infections. Rodrigo couldn't go to school anymore. We had to see life in a different way. You just have to worry about following the plan, which lowers your level of fear. Because even though whenever they tell you cancer, you start like shaking, still there was a plan.
After 2 weeks at home, Jimena called me, Rodrigo has fever. Well, you don't imagine the stress that you can get when that actually happens.
His fever came like 2 degrees up in 15 minutes. I called the hospital and they said okay, in 30 minutes you can measure it again. And I was measuring again, it was 101. I was like, no, I'm going there immediately. I was in the car and he was like, Rodrigo, don't fall asleep. I don't know why we have that feeling that he cannot fall asleep. I remember I put my flashing lights and I was like cutting all the lights. I was like with my window open, like, I'm sorry.
It was a MRSA infection of the port, and the port had to be removed. The infection is very tricky because it can spread out through the body that has no defense to that. And that's when we were like, okay, this is how things can go dark so quickly.
That was the moment where I really thought we could lose him. Yeah. It was the real moment where I was like, he may die. Not from leukemia, from an infection. A simple infection can change your life. It turned out to be a month in the hospital.
And we felt somehow lucky. We said, well, at least we're getting treated in a place that we don't have to move, change life. Some of us could still work and Camila can go to school. That's good, that's great.
At Dell Children, it's a family. They all know each other. They make you feel like they are part of you. Doctors, nurses, the people that go with the food carts, the people who clean your room, they have a mission there.
Rodrigo completed therapy in May of 2021.
We were very excited to say nights without sleeping, stress, this is what it's worth.
We went to Disney World to celebrate.
Vaccines were in place.
COVID was low. We were all tan. We went to the beach.
Life was normal.
And then
Yeah.
we were showering Rodrigo and we started looking at his back and he had like little purple dots. And so we searched like hematoma and it was called petechia. And we read like causes for petechia and
There are many.
many leukemia. We were walking around the neighborhood. We weren't like the two of us alone for the walk and we just didn't want to talk about it. But we were like, well, if it is, it is.
Yeah, I mean, we started to see these signs, and now you become very, factual, Your feelings could be here, but the facts are here. When we finally talk, like, do we understand that we very likely are having to deal with this again?
So we went to see Dr. Wells. He said, we're going to do a bone marrow aspiration again. I remember he entering the room with a little piece of paper and his eyes were kind of watery and his voice was broken. He said, this is horrible. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I mean, I am so sorry for this. And we were like, we kind of thought.
Rodrigo was diagnosed with relapse of his leukemia about 2 years and a few months after he was initially diagnosed.
That same day, he had the two options, and we have CAR T-cell therapy and we have bone marrow transplant. And he said, we cannot perform them here. What would you like to do? Like, would you like to go to Houston or Dallas? And I was like, here, but there's not the option.
Rodrigo's only potentially curative options at that point, we don't do because we don't have a marrow transplant program. Hopefully we'll have marrow transplantation here in 2023.
Dr. Wells said, if Rodrigo was my grandson, we want him to be fully cured. His best chance is to do the CAR T-cell therapy. And to me, to hear those words from him saying, if he was my grandson, I didn't even look for something else.
I would say that when you have to move to another place, it's an earthquake, where our life is shaking, but at a different level.
You have to think about your other child's school, their routines, then work for parents, like what do we do with our work? Like we have to stop. Also meeting another team of doctors, like rebuilding those relationships with other people. We went to Houston.
It was definitely the most difficult time.
Just being in Houston, having to separate from our daughter, her birthday happened while we were in Houston.
She was lucky enough to have 4 grandparents and they had to travel every weekend. Rodrigo suffered a lot. Leukemia got a different dimension. He got sicker very often and very, very bad. I mean, like sepsis, it was very awful. I mean, like very, very awful in comparison to whatever we had lived before. We thought, that this is gonna be an outpatient treatment, that he gets the cells, and then we go back home, there in Houston, to stay another 3-4 weeks. He got the T cells day 1. We left the hospital at 4 p.m. By 6 p.m. we were driving back to the hospital. And since then, we spent more than 60 days in the hospital. Rodrigo got into remission again, which was great news.
It's unbelievable.
Rodrigo's back in Austin now with his family. Could Rodrigo's leukemia come back yet again? Yes, it could. We're large enough and developed enough, we absolutely should have an allogeneic marrow transplant program at Dell Children's Medical Center.
I don't care about the numbers. My son has a second chance. That's what matters.
In our case, I mean, it would have been
A huge difference.
huge difference. Like,
The place where you are, the people that you have around matters the most.
it's just like appreciation of moments, being all together under the same roof.
Rodrigo he's a hero. I know his intelligence is so big that he knows what he's going through, but never complains about it. But he knows he's going through a process that is not similar to other kids.
Rodrigo is the one pulling us from the darkest moment to say, hey, I'm here. And I'm still here, so keep fighting.